So just current news in dog training right now, right? So there's a podcast that came out last week by Ivan Balabanov. I've talked about him before because he had a podcast with Larry Crone that I listened to that we just dissected a little bit, kind of broke down our opinion on, obviously. He did a podcast with this guy, Michael... I'm going to totally butcher this guy's last name. Hold on.
Oh, no.
Where is it? I'm going to find it in a second.
All right.
Michael Shikashio.
Shikashio.
I think it's Michael Shikashio.
Let me see it.
Shikashio? Is that how you say that?
Yeah, we'll go with that. Shikashio.
Yeah, something like that, right? So whatever. So Ivan obviously is a globally renowned dog trainer, competitive dog trainer, right? Yeah. He's like three-time world champion and like 8-time national champion. Very established trainer, right? Dude knows what the fuck he's doing.
He's been around.
He's been around the block. He's been training dogs for like 40 years, something like that.
Yeah.
Right? Michael is a force-free trainer, right?
Okay.
Fine, right? And his specialty is like how he advertises himself is he's like an aggression specialist, right? Now, from everything I've seen so far about this guy, I dig his stuff. You know what I mean? I've got nothing wrong with it. He has a podcast called The Bitey End of the Leash, I believe, right? Which I think is a fucking hilarious name.
It is hilarious.
And, he talks to different people, and he's very, obviously, like a lot of the force-free community, very analytical, kind of science-backed with stuff and this and that, and very well-spoken. And I think a lot of his concepts and ideas are really, really good. I think there's a lot that can be learned from guys like him, right? Because he doesn't seem, from what I've seen, he doesn't seem super, like, in the force-free camp of pushing, like, this stuff is bad, which is, I feel like, a lot of the marketing tactics. It's more like, this is what I do. Now, questionable nature to, like, if you go on his page and stuff like that, virtually all of his content is him talking about methods, right? Which is again a lot of our issue with a lot of this stuff, which is like, let's kind of see some of it, right? And a lot of his demonstrations he does, because he's a dog trainer at this point, right? Like he doesn't really work with a lot of clients. I don't think, again, I'm making a lot of assumptions here right now, just based on what I've seen on his social media channels, obviously. And a lot of his seminars that he does, he does the thing that a lot of people do, which is like, we work with stuffed dogs, right? So I demonstrate techniques using fake dogs, which is, listen, when you get into learning mechanics of dog training with things like that, like let's say I'm trying to teach a dog trainer leash handling techniques, right? How to hold the leash, right? How to apply and release pressure, stuff like that. There's something to be said about, do I actually need a real dog in order to teach those things? Not necessarily. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like a lot of that stuff probably can be taught with a fake dog, right? If I'm focused on my mechanic, right? Like if I'm focusing on the me side of things, a lot of things can be done without a dog, right? Yeah. A good example, right? Michael Ellis, one of my favorite trainers, obviously very, very popular, very well-established competitive dog trainer. In his first DVD that I watched, The Power of Training Dogs with Food, there were a lot of things when he was talking about luring and stuff, like food luring, where he was demonstrating it. Like one of the things in particular, because like a lot of people have a hard time luring in straight lines, right? He had 2 cones and a fucking piece of string strung along it that were at like dog nose height. And he had people practicing it on the fucking strings. So again, I'm not hating on working with fake dogs by means, right? Like I think that's fine.
Okay.
But I haven't really seen him like really work with actual dogs that much.
Dogs.
Right?
Interesting.
So whatever. So they had this podcast, and the intent of this podcast was to be, hey, like this is the first time like a well-established balance trainer and a well-established force-free trainer are going to sit down and kind of hash some shit out, right? I was super excited when this podcast came out. And then I was even more excited that I saw it was like 3.5 hours long, because I fucking love a good podcast. I love a good long podcast where we could get into the weeds of some shit.
Yeah.
Right? I'm listening to it. It was good. First 45 minutes of like they're kind of like, they're starting off with the friendly introductions. This is what I do. This is what I do. Hey, like we don't agree on everything. Obviously, we disagree on a lot of things, but it's good that we could sit here and have this conversation. Then we get an hour in, then we get an hour and a half in, then we get 2 hours in, and and I'm being overly critical right now.
Okay.
Like literally the first 2.5 hours of this podcast was talking in circles of basically just repeating over and over again. We don't agree on everything, but it's okay because we could have a conversation. Like just literally just saying that, right? And why don't more people do this? Why don't more people have the conversation? I was like, well, can you guys actually talk about something?
Please. Yeah.
Like, can you actually talk about something, please, right? And then finally, right, at like 2 hours and 45 minutes, I feel like, right? Like of a 3.5 hour long podcast.
Okay.
Finally, Ivan's like, all right, let's talk about e-collars a little bit, right? I was like, boom, here we go. Come on, right? Give me some juice, right?
Give it to him.
And they talked about it for like 20 minutes, right? And didn't really even talk about anything. It was all like there was like Ivan threw out like a couple like hypotheticals, and then Michael threw out a couple like kind of hypotheticals, but there was like and they clearly disagreed, but there was no like digging into the disagreement and like let's figure out what we disagree about and like, you know, debate the actual why we disagree about it and stuff like that. There was kind of none of that. It just kind of then stopped. They just stopped talking about it and then moved on to another conversation, and then like it ended. And it ended because Ivan said that like his because it was 3.5 hours, it was a long podcast. He was like, "Oh, my guy says that my batteries or my memory card is filled up on my camera. Like we can't film anymore." You know?
Yeah.
It was just like it was kind of frustrating because I was like I was really looking forward to it. I was like, both these guys are very smart. Both these guys are very well spoken. You know, and they're gonna hash some shit out. And there really just was like not.
Yeah.
All it was like a friendly like, hey, we could get along with each other.
Yeah.
That was it.